is here to serve all of you today. Would you rise so we can thank you for your love of us and all that you did, every minute, all the time. Who stepped up? We don't do this alone. It takes a village to do church. Right? So good to be with you again. We're here for part 2 of this sermon called One Anothering, Loving Your Neighbor as Yourself. And that I stole that one anothering is not my thing. It's something that's all through the Bible about how we're to one another. But there's a great series that I used as a minister, a small group teaching of one anothering, so you can actually have small groups around this, so we can really learn a lot better. So it's a great book. I don't know if you've ever used it or could. The other thing is the reading that came today, a long reading, but necessary reading for us to understand. Very necessary. Robert Fuller and Pamela Gerloff actually wrote a primer off of that book, Somebody's and Nobody's, that you can take and do in small groups. And it's called Dignity for All, How to Create a World Without Rankism. So I want to do that, because I always thought, as a minister in MCC, I always got frustrated. I remember being on conference floors. Anybody been on a conference floor in the denomination? Okay. And the budget time would come, and every group, the women, the trans, the HIV/AIDS, all the different groups that we could represent and do, right, in this room, if you counted us all up, had to have a line in the budget. And then we would fight over whose cause and ism was more important to address and solve than the others. What's that about? Rankism in us, right? It's in us. We do it too. It is not just them in Washington right now. They're doing it really loud, so that's a mirror to us. This is a mirror, people. Yes. It's saying what we do every day in our life, as we participate in this rankist system, we call forward leaders that are more rankist than we ever thought could be. Amen. This is what has happened in our country. This is what we're dealing with. So, last week, I talked about how important it was that every one of us in this time to defeat that in us, and this rankist kind of mentality that's just flaring these days, is that the only solution is the one Jesus gave us, and that was to do more about increasing my own capacity, your own capacity, our capacities together to love one another. Boy, isn't that just one little phrase, love one another, but woo, not easy. Hasn't been easy for us to get this one. Still. So we talked about a key practice that would help us last week, so I hope you used it. The idea just to be considerate of others. Just go out in your life and see someone else today other than yourself. Really easy, especially when we're discriminated against. And we're experiencing being in the victim position of the racist program. It's really easy to say, I can just whine and be miserable and, not do love. It's their job to love me, not me to love them. Well, it's the reverse of that. You see, because my loving you gets love coming back at me. That's the way it works. You can't get what you don't put out.
Okay.
All right? So rankism, this dance of nobodies and somebodies, it's a program of relational behavior that we're all steeped in. Guess what? From the time we were born. In fact, this has been alive as the way we do life and relationship for 100,000 years. That's a long time. So rankism's our default program. Anytime we get stressed, especially even if we try to love, if we get stressed, how easy it is, isn't it, to go rankist on somebody and make it and blame the other and tell us that it's about them. But in this reading today, we remember that unlike all the isms that were listed in that reading, it's important to remember that rank is mutable and transferable. This is what we share, is rank, our rank in this culture. And I have news for us, rank's not going to go away. right? And the reason why rank doesn't go away is because we do have different proclivities, we have different natures, skills, and talents and gifts. Some of us have greater range and scope of responsibility in the organizations or relationships we're part of. So we'll always have rank. The problem isn't rank, the problem is the abuse of rank from one person to another. And we've all done it. I want you to, in this moment, yeah, this may be strange for me to ask you to as a congregation, but I'd like you to turn to somebody and just share with them one relationship and just name it. Don't go into detail. Don't tell them all about the story and the drama. But just say, here's one way I was a nobody in this relationship. It was at work. My boss treated me bad, okay? And then I want you to share with them one way that you've been a somebody. Where have you been a somebody in your life? So just turn to each other. Right now we're going to take literally 3 minutes. So one person talk for 90 seconds and the next will talk and we'll move on. Tell your neighbor. One relationship where you were nobody, one where you were somebody.
Exactly. Yeah. I felt like at the same time.
Yeah, when you have a problem,
Okay, if you haven't talked yet, turn the page, share, let the other person talk now and share.
Yeah.
Okay, somebody just told me y'all will talk all day if I let you. And you know what, that's perfectly fine because what we really want to have is a conversation. So I'm glad you're talking to each other. So I want to know, who had a story to share about being a nobody? Raise your hand if you did. Oh, good. How many of you have had a story of being a somebody? Wow. You see this? Rankism is this dance every day. Somebody, nobody. Somebody, nobody. Somebody, nobody. Now, how well does that work? Not really well. And you know, I believe that Jesus' purpose was to actually awaken us to this rankist relational pattern. To wake up to this. He told lots of stories, you know. He was a whistleblower in his day, you know. Jesus was a friggin' whistleblower. He used stories like parables to teach, especially the religious leaders of the day, his Jewish synagogue leaders, about their rankist behaviors and the rankist temple structures that they had made to ensure that all they would ever do is be rank. Rank. Yeah. So they disliked Jesus so much. Why? Because he read their beads with his stories. He told them the truth, and he pointed out their rank abuse of the people in the temple. One of these occasions, because he was always being chased by, you know, he was always being chased by the lawyers of the temple and the Pharisees and the Sadducees because they wanted to take him out, you know, shut him up. So they would always ask him puzzling questions, you know. So one day a temple lawyer comes up and he says, well, hey, Jesus, what's the greatest of all the Jewish laws, you know, that we're supposed to follow? If we did, then we'd really have it. And so what Jesus then says, well, there's 2 commandments. That's it. That's it. All the law and the prophets, there's 2 things. If you will do this, you will get what it is my Father sent me to be and do. And he said, that the commandment, the first one was what? Love God, right? And the second, love your neighbor. Actually, what Scripture tells us that if we do love God, we will love our neighbor. In fact, the only way we love God is we love our neighbor. The only way. The only way. So the story, then the lawyer says, that's not good enough, I didn't catch him. So I got to ask him another question. So he says, so who's my neighbor? Who's my neighbor? So what does Jesus do? He tells them the story of the Good Samaritan. How many of you know that story? I'll just briefly remind, just in case someone hasn't heard it yet. But it was a story about a traveling businessman who wasn't even from that area. And for all we know, we don't even know he was a Jew or not. We have no knowledge of his station in life. But he found himself, unfortunately, he was beat up, burglarized, all of his belongings gone, and he found himself lying in a ditch by the side of the road. And so then, a few priests walk by. You know, they go by, a priest and then a Levite. Neither one of them stops. And the only one Jesus says who does stop to help the man in the ditch is a person called a Samaritan. Who were the Samaritans? The Samaritans were those people who were deemed less than. They were the nobodies in the Jewish faith tradition. All right? So it was a nobody that saw the person that was harmed, got into the ditch, took that person out, took him to an inn, paid for all his well-being back into his health. But it was a Samaritan. It was a nobody that saw, not a somebody. So, interesting then, after telling the parable, here comes the lawyer again, you know. But this time Jesus asks the lawyer a question. He turns it around on him. And he says, sorry, what was that? It's okay. So, here, I'm going to get my phrase here. So he said, he says, who was the neighbor in that story? To the lawyer. And the lawyer says, oh, it was the Samaritan. It was the one who showed mercy toward his neighbor. And the neighbor was what? A stranger. A stranger, not a person of their faith. It didn't matter. It was just a stranger, and then nobody saw it and took care of it. And Jesus said, go and do likewise to the lawyer. This is what you're called to do. So loving others, caring and having mercy for others is the basic Christian action in the world. That's it. It's that simple. Every day, in every relationship. So what's required to be a good Samaritan? What's required? Number one, you got to see beyond yourself. You got to get unstuck from yourself. And look at the other and care about the other. Not just your own needs, but their needs as well. So you have to do that. And loving, have you noticed? Being loved requires 2 or more people. You can't do this by yourself. You can't do it. Most of us that have been alone for any part of our time know how it's not about being alone. And the love doesn't come unless we're in the company of each other. In fact, I don't know about you, but the only reason I know the love that I know today is because someone else taught me that. Right? It was my mother, my father, my parents, my teachers. Somebody taught me about love. So that's our job, is to teach others about love by being that. So the biggest lesson of my life has been learning about what love is in the context of human relationships. I have spent the last 28 years since leaving pastoral ministry to figure this out, because I was in so many churches that were so rankist. It hurt my heart. I didn't know what to do, but I knew that it wasn't about being rankist. So I've been studying it, and I wrote a book about it. My version, called Co-Creating Good, Healthy Relationships. This is my book on how to stop rankism, if you have it in your life. And I wrote it, and I share in it 2 different relational cultures that we could be part of. The first is rankist and rank-based. It's called the culture of command, control, and blaming relationships. The second culture is a loving one another culture, a culture of co-creation, collaboration, and cooperative relationships. In the church, it's known as a culture of love, appreciation, and trust. And isn't it fascinating, to me, it's just fascinating that Jesus said, where two or more are gathered, there I am in the midst of them. Meaning that you and I don't meet God other than through these relationships we have, ever. And every relationship is either helping you or not helping you be a good Samaritan. So we've got to unearth those. We're co-responsible for this lack of love or rankism that we experience. So in this book, I confess that I was unconscious about my rankism until I was 47 years old. I did not get this, really. I thought it was all those other people were not doing this. Truth was, I wasn't. And so after 47 years, because I went out and did all this research in it, got educated, and became an organizational development consultant and primarily with churches. I got all this education, I went and I worked with 30 churches and I wanted to ferret out what is the pattern here? What doesn't work? And so I saw this pattern of rankism in every congregation I worked with. Every single one. I saw it in the relationships between pastors and boards of directors. I saw it between boards of directors and the congregation itself. I saw it member to member. But the good thing I did through the research in my master's program was I was able to define, and thank God for MCC St. Louis, because I worked with them, their whole congregation opened up to me. We did this huge study, and we figured out how to shift it together. So, but what it required of that congregation, and anyone that wants to really be non-rankist, is you have to change the structure of how you do church.
That's right.
You can't do church the same. So we've got to be creative. So part of the wake-up call to my own forms of rankism and how I was ferreting that out personally and professionally is I had to do, and I do this for people regularly now, I give them relationship inventories. But I had to take my own relationship inventory. And what I learned about my relationship history was I had never been in a non-rankist relationship or organization, ever. So if they were going to happen, I would need to be a part of helping that happen and us create what could make that possible. So I had a lot of learning to do, and I still do, because we don't do this thing perfectly, especially when I get mad. I still yell at the TV when some one person comes on, you know, and you know, I get steamed up about, whoa, this isn't going to work, you know. But all of us do. But I then made a commitment to stop rankism in me and my life. And after ending my second rankist marriage, one in which I was the somebody, and the other one in which I was nobody, by the way. So I had one relationship on somebody, one I didn't. Did you know that? And then you change the next relationship, you're the next, then you flip back. Then you become somebody again, then you become nobody again. Okay. And that's because we're interacting in this way, you know. So I made a vow, and in 1997, I was so blessed because I met my wife, Paula. She was here with us last week. She's in Europe today, working. But we together met in a 12-step program to quit smoking. And in healing those addictions and all the conversations we had, we learned that both of us were tired of rankist relationships. We were done with them. We didn't want to do it again. And so we asked each other, would we dare to get in relationship and have it not be rankist? And that we would work to create a relationship that wasn't about that. So we've learned some things, and I hope it'll help you. We don't guess or assume anymore that we know what each other is thinking, ever. We don't act based on our assumptions about each other. We don't try to read each other's minds. Do you know that's impossible? Why do you try? You can't do it, you know? But we don't act before knowing what each other's thinking. We take time to practice. Every week we meet on Sunday night, even by phone when she's traveling, and we talk about the coming week. We talk about our needs and how we're going to use our resource, time, and everything to make sure both our needs get met. So that's our practice every week. Because you see, love is about meeting needs. Bottom line. If you think about when you have felt loved, remember those joyous moments? You go, yeah, I love this. I'll take more of this. You know, what was happening? Whatever relationship you were in, or maybe you were in a teamwork meeting, it just buzzed and flowed and it went really well. Your needs were met. Everybody's needs in the room were being met. That's the feel of love, is needs being met. So we have to, if we're going to be good Samaritans, we've got to ask each other what our needs are and not assume I know what they are. And then I think one of the hardest things was my wife, Paula, I had to learn how to love her the way she needed to be loved. Not the way I wanted to love her. Of course, wasn't that funny? I wanted to love her the same way I wanted to be loved, so I would do for her the thing. Oh my gosh, it was disaster. Meaningless. But when I stopped and we got to know each other and I could know what love meant to her, and I'd say, and I would ask you this, I would say, so if I loved you, Paula, what would I be doing for you? What would that look like? How would I spend my time? How would I spend my money? What would I do so that you know you are loved? So she told me, and she tells me, and we have a written agreement. We've been in a written agreement relationship for, what? A long time. And if you want, we had to make an agreement. You see, Rankus and Rankus relationship isn't solved without a new track and a new program. So we were so schooled in Rankism, we had to have it as a written document so we could go back to it and refer to it when we went off on our Rankus ways again, so we could come back. But there's examples in this book in the back for a personal relationship, so you and a partner, a spouse, you can see what a relationship agreement looks like. You can see one for a small work group, and you can see one for a church. You can see one for a church that allows you, perhaps, to see if there's things you could do to make this experience less rankist and more loving. So, please feel free to get the book. It's on Amazon if you'd like to get it. But in closing here, I just want to say that what would it be if we all dared? Literally, we leave this house today and every day this week, every day we dare ourselves to treat everyone today like the Good Samaritan treated the man in the ditch. What if we didn't walk by anymore? What if we stopped? What if we stopped and asked a homeless person, what's your name? What's your greatest need today? And that you help meet that need. Not that you have to do it personally, but you can get the person to get the help they need. What if we all did that? We saw someone wounded, someone in need of a time. Maybe somebody just in a waiting room in a hospital in lots of pain. Maybe just going over and saying, hi, how are you? How can I help? Something. What if we did that? What Jesus said is that if we do these acts of loving one another, which means taking others into consideration, getting to know their needs, and then meeting those needs, that's the act of love. Then why wouldn't we do that ourselves, if that's what it is? I know that loving won't happen in our committing to practice being in non-racist and non-racist ways. All those isms need to go. So please, for the sake of Christ's love for you and the teaching of it, keep doing these consideration practices. If you're in a relationship right now and it's sour, I just offer you to let down your guard. It's not about who's right or wrong, no matter what's going on. It's about how you could, by knowing each other's needs around that situation, create a different pathway so that your loving connection can stay and not go away. Bottom line, loving is not about being right or wrong. It's about doing what works for the people in that relationship that are there, uniquely there. If you will do this, if you will make an agreement to be a good Samaritan, I really believe that would be Jesus' definition of a good Christian, is a good Samaritan. So you'll be the lucky one. Remember, as you leave this place today, all destructive conflict happens when someone's needs are not being met. Period. Period. The only solution to conflict is to meet together, get to know the needs, and then create a plan of action. Use your shared resources to fulfill everyone's needs. It can be done. So MCC, thank you for being here. No, really, thank you. You have a message. You've been preaching the message of God's unconditional love for all people since 1968. 51 years. Keep doing it. Be it. Do this work. You are gifted, you are blessed, and you are loved. Amen.
Amen.